Hey guys, welcome back to more Malicious Compliance Reddit stories. In this Ripestories video, my boss fired me after 20 years and replaced me with AI. But before I walked out, he made one critical mistake. He put his worst decision in writing, and what happened next cost him absolutely everything. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled, "After 20 years of hard, loyal work, my boss fired me and replaced me with AI, but it ends terribly." So I worked payroll and payroll compliance for a regional trucking and warehouse company for a little over 20 years. When I started, we were small enough that payroll lived in a back office with 2 people, one printer that jammed every other day, and a filing cabinet that was older than I was. By the time all this happened, we had just under 300 employees spread across several terminals, plus drivers crossing multiple states every week, warehouse crews, mechanics, dispatch, office staff, and a rotating pile of temporary workers. My title sounded boring, payroll manager. What I actually did though was keep the company from stepping on legal landmines. Anyone who has never worked payroll before thinks it is simple. Hours go in and money comes out. In a tiny office with 10 salaried people, sure, but in a company with hourly crews, drivers, different pay codes, different states, union routes in one terminal but not another, mileage pay, detention pay, layover pay, shift differentials, and court-ordered deductions, reimbursements, and constant dispatch mistakes, it gets messy fast. The software handled the easy part, what it didn't handle was reality. Reality looked like this: a driver gets held at a port for 6 hours because a container wasn't ready, and dispatch forgets to code the detention time. A California driver misses a meal break because dispatch stacked his route wrong, which legally triggers premium pay. For 20 years I caught those kinds of things. I had checklists, spreadsheets, reminder flags, side notes, and a very good memory. And some of it was formal policy, but a lot of it was not. It was old email approvals, written exceptions, and union-side agreements, regional practices, and direct promises operations had made to keep people from walking out the door during rough years. I'm not saying I was magic, I'm saying I knew where all the bodies were buried, and I knew exactly which ugly little workarounds were keeping the machine running. My old boss respected the job, and if I told him, "This has to be fixed before Friday, or we're going to have a problem," he listened to me. But then he retired, and that was when Brandon arrived. Brandon came in from some tech-adjacent software company. Based on the way he talked, I'm pretty sure he spent most of his time making slideshows about efficiency transformation, while other people did the actual work. He was hired as a finance executive, but within a few months he had his hands in operations, HR, payroll, vendor selection, software, and even staffing. He had that specific kind of arrogant confidence some people get when they've never actually had to clean up the mess after a bad decision. He loved buzzwords: optimization, lean transition, strategic automation, labor rationalization. I heard him say scalability so often I started to hate the word on principle. The first time he sat in one of my payroll meetings, he lasted about 15 minutes before scoffing and saying, "I'm confused why this still requires so much human intervention." I gave him the short version: because the software only knows what it's told. It doesn't know when dispatch coded something wrong, when a terminal made an operational exception, or when a state-specific rule kicks in because the situation on the ground changed. He smiled at me like I just told him the earth was flat. Then we should be fixing the process, not paying for tribal knowledge. Tribal knowledge. He used that phrase like an insult. Anything that was not neatly written into one central automated system apparently offended him. He acted like the company had functioned badly for years, and when the truth was, the company only functioned at all because people like me kept it from flying apart. At first I really tried to work with him. I showed him where the system worked and where it didn't, and I built a report showing how many manual corrections we made in a typical month and what categories they fell into. I thought if he saw the raw numbers, maybe it would click, but instead he saw a target. 3 weeks later he announced that we were modernizing the back office and partnering with an AI payroll automation vendor. The pitch, according to Brandon, was that the new system would read time records, dispatch notes, payroll history, and company policy, then automate exception handling, detect anomalies, and reduce dependency on legacy staff. That last part got my attention. After the meeting, I asked him directly, "What does reduce dependency on legacy staff mean?" He gave me that fake, overly friendly corporate look and said, "It means we are building a model that doesn't depend on one person carrying institutional knowledge in his head." I pushed back, "This is not just institutional knowledge. Some of these are legal compliance issues." He just shrugged, "Then we will encode them." Like, I could just dump 20 years of human judgment and operational triage into a digital box and then be done. The vendor demos were a slow-motion train wreck. The vendor's people came in with slick dashboards, polished language, and a lot of unearned confidence. During the demos they showed, the system looked amazing because they were feeding it perfectly clean, sample data, and simple scenarios. Something like hourly shift worker clocks in at 8, clocks out at 5, takes lunch, receives holiday differential, paycheck generated. Wow, incredible, human civilization has peaked. I kept asking questions that made the room uncomfortable. What happens when dispatch codes detention after the payroll cutoff and wants it on the same check? How does it handle California meal premium when the time card itself is clean but the route notes showed the break physically couldn't happen? What does it do with side agreements that are in signed PDFs and old HR emails but are not explicitly in the current employee handbook? The vendor always had some version of the same hand-wavy answer: the system can be trained. Brandon loved that answer, and then one afternoon he called me to his office with an HR rep sitting there. He slid a paper across the desk. It was not a termination notice yet, it was just an aggressive 30-day AI transition plan. He said, "I've promised the board a Q3 rollout to prove our new scalability. Over the next 30 days we are fast-tracking the platform. Your role will shift exclusively to documentation and knowledge transfer." I read it once and looked up. "So you're replacing me with AI?" Brandon did that smug little steeple thing with his fingers. "We are replacing a manual function with a more scalable process." HR looked down at the table, refusing to make eye contact. I asked, "And after 30 days? Your position is being eliminated." Just like that. 20 years gone in one sentence. I wish I could say I made some dramatic speech, but I didn't. I just sat there and felt this weird numbness. I asked about severance and they offered me 8 weeks. 8 weeks for 2 decades of keeping them out of court. Then Brandon ended the part that changed everything. "We are moving from a hero-based culture to a systems-based culture. If you're manually saving the day, you're creating process debt. No more invisible labor. Starting today, I want you to stop making any off-book adjustments. If a terminal forgot to submit something, if a manager wants special correction, if dispatch coded something late, I don't want you cleaning it up quietly anymore. Let it fail. Route everything through the approved workflow so the AI can learn the real process." AI is smarter than people like you. I actually asked him to repeat that, and he did, slower this time like I was the stupid one. "Only documented approved workflow, no exceptions." I nodded and said okay. I sent him an email before I even made it back to my desk and I wrote, "Per your instruction, effective immediately, I will no longer make manual payroll adjustments outside written policy and approved workflow. Items not formally documented in policy or approved in the transition process will be routed back for review rather than corrected at the payroll level." He replied, "Correct." That one-word email was worth its weight in gold later. So from that point on I did exactly what Brandon told me to do. No more quiet fixes, no more catching dispatch's mess and cleaning it up because I knew drivers needed the money, no more digging through old approvals, I routed everything back. At first, people thought I was just being difficult. A dispatcher called and said, "Can you just fix this one? The driver's detention got missed." I said, "Please submit it through the ticketing process." Brandon wants all adjustments documented for system training. One of the HR assistants came to my office and whispered, "Are you serious right now?" And I said, "Completely. I'm following instructions." Once I stopped absorbing the friction, the whole company started feeling it. Drivers waited longer for corrections. Dispatch suddenly saw how often they created payroll issues because now every single one came back as a locked item. Brandon thought this was progress. He kept saying, "See? We are exposing process debt." That's an easy thing to say when you're not the one answering calls from guys who are short on rent because somebody forgot to code their layover pay. During the transition I didn't sabotage anything, I documented every official process exactly as requested, but during one meeting I brought up a list of long-standing exceptions that existed in various old signed emails, detention minimums, freezer crew differentials, local weekend dispatch agreements and so on. Brandon flipped through the list and said, "How many of these are in the current handbook?" "Not many," I replied. "Then they are not real controls," he sneered. "They are habits. If they matter, the business can reapprove them later. I don't want folklore baked into a system." So I wrote that down too. After the meeting I sent another email that said, "Per today's discussion, legacy pay practices not reflected in current policy or approved configuration will not be included in the go-live rule set unless separately reapproved." And Brandon replied, "Yes." On my last day, HR had me sign the severance agreement and hand over my credentials. Brandon actually stopped by my office and said, "No hard feelings, I hope. This is just where the industry is going." I smiled. "No hard feelings. I followed your plan perfectly. For the first week after I left, nothing dramatic happened. The first payroll run was mostly salaried people and low-complexity hourly staff. Brandon sent out a smug company-wide note saying it processed smoothly. The second payroll was where reality showed up. It started with a text from a warehouse supervisor I knew. "They shorted half my night crew." Then a veteran driver texted, "My check is missing port wait time and meal premium." Then another, "They reversed a reimbursement and now my check is under by $400. By lunchtime I knew exactly what had happened. The AI had gone live on a real payroll with real messy human data. It was strictly following the approved rules it got, and the approved rules were incomplete because Brandon had explicitly ordered me to make them incomplete. That afternoon I got my first panic call from the HR assistant. She sounded like she was one bad email away from a breakdown. "Do you know where the detention exception table is?" she pleaded. "There is not one in the Go Live package," I said, "but the system is dropping detention if dispatch posts after cutoff, and Brandon says it used to get handled." "It did," I replied gently, "manually, by me." Dead silence, and then very quietly she said, "Brandon says you must have hidden a file or something." "No," I said firmly. "I documented every approved process. If he wants anything else, he should review his emails." Well, that evening, Brandon called me. I let it ring. He texted, "Call me, urgent." I waited an hour before calling back. He picked up on the first ring coming in hot. "What exactly did you do?" "Nothing," I said. "Don't play games. Payroll is a disaster," he snapped. "Then your disaster has very good documentation." He started aggressively listing issues: missed detention, wrong differentials, bad final check, garnishment errors, and I let him vent. Then I asked him, "Did the AI follow written policy and approved workflow?" "That's not the point." "That's exactly the point," I replied. "You told me no more personal judgment calls, no more undocumented exceptions, only a written approved process, so that is what I gave you." He switched tactics, going from angry to smooth corporate speak. "Okay, fine, we have a temporary bandwidth issue. Can you come in tomorrow and help us straighten it out?" I asked, "As what exactly?" He sighed into the phone. "Don't be difficult. As a professional courtesy to the team." I actually laughed out loud this time. "Brandon, my employment was legally severed. I'm no longer on your payroll. If you want my tribal knowledge back, my consulting rate for emergency cleanup is $350 an hour, paid up front with a 40-hour minimum. Otherwise, I suggest you ask the AI." And yeah, guys, I'm curious, if you would be in this situation, would you help the old company out? Especially if there's an awful boss like Brandon in the game? Let me know what you would have done in the comments, and while you're at it, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Afterwards, I hung up. Things imploded fast. Payroll mistakes create chain reactions. Drivers had bills auto-drafting. A terminated employee got shorted and immediately filed a labor board complaint. Operations was furious because employees were spending half their day arguing about pay instead of moving freight. And in the trucking industry, once drivers lose trust in payroll, they stop moving. A bunch of drivers simply refused extra weekend runs until their missing money got fixed. It was a massive labor slowdown that wrecked service metrics at exactly the wrong time, causing late pickups for the company's biggest retail clients. That finally got the board's attention. 10 days after the first bad payroll, I got a call from someone way above Brandon, a guy close to the owner. He was very polite to me and he asked what happened with the transition, and I kept it simple. I told him the system had only been given the approved written rules, but the real process depended on judgment calls that Brandon specifically ordered me to stop making. I told him I had those instructions in writing, and he asked me to forward these emails. So I did. Brandon kept trying to blame the software, then the vendor, then the staff's resistance to change, but too many people had seen the paper trail. The worst part for him was that there was no mystery and no sabotage. The system had done exactly what he demanded. He wanted a cleaner, leaner process, and what he got was the raw version of the company's own incompetence, with nobody left in the middle quietly covering it up. The board stopped seeing it as an IT problem and saw it as a leadership problem. From what I heard, the meeting that ended Brandon's career was incredibly ugly. He tried to argue that I had not transferred enough knowledge, which lasted right up until someone pulled up the emails where I asked about legacy exceptions, and Brandon had explicitly said no, there's no grace for recovery from your own emails. A few days later, a buddy texted me, "He's gone." Brandon got taken down by his own arrogant instructions, and I guess AI assured that it happened as quick as possible. That's what I call efficiency. A few months later, I took another job with another company. I now got a better title, much better pay, a lot less chaos, and most importantly, leadership that actually understands the difference between software algorithms and 20 years of human experience. And the next one is a fantastic malicious compliance story, which is titled "Free Roof because my insurance guy wants to play games." So my wife's grandma passed away and left us her home in her will. The house was rather large but had been built sometime in the 1960s and needed updating. We decided to basically gut the home and do a full remodel. First thing was to talk to my insurance guy and see what I needed to do with the insurance. He comes out and explains that I need to do a fire policy, which basically will replace the structure in the event of a major catastrophe. Cool, insurance in place, I start remodeling. Fast forward 7 or 8 months and I am done and so bone tired and mad at the world that my reflection in the mirror tried to avoid me. I was working a rotating shift, days, evenings, midnights, and spending every waking moment working on this house. 5 hours a day/night was the most sleep I was getting. I would snap at the wind for blowing. I was so strung out. Cue the insurance guy and his antics. While I was sleeping after working midnight shift, my wife has IG, insurance guy, come to look at the house and change the policy back to full coverage. When I wake up for my next shift, she informs me that we have to put a new roof on before he can change the policy. I almost came unglued. I had ripped the ceilings out of this house, so if there had been a roof leak, I'm pretty sure I would have found it. Luckily, this was Friday evening, so I had the entire weekend to calm down and plot my next move. I called first thing Monday morning and set up an appointment for 8 AM Tuesday at the house and explained to him that I was on midnights and to please make sure that he was there by 8 AM. No particular reason, I just hoped it would discomfort him having to be somewhere else that early in the morning. A dick move mostly. Tuesday morning rolls around and he shows up with his boss. At first this threw me off, but I figure what the hell, 2 birds, 1 rock and stuff. Me, IG, how's it going? IG, pretty good, how are you? Me, tired. How about you show me exactly what is wrong with this roof so we can get going? IG said, sure thing, step right over here. You see that shingle? Me, yeah. IG, see how bad a shape it is in? Me, sure do. Thinking to myself, hell no, what the F are you looking at? IG, and over there, see that place? Me, yep, got a bad spot or 2 there as well. IG, this roof has taken some serious storm damage. It is in rough shape. We proceed all the way around the house with him pointing at random spots as far as I could tell and saying things like, that shingle is shot, those 2, yeah, and right here. The whole time, I just did like a chicken packing and affirmed with him, yep, you're right, all the while his boss is saying nothing. After he's finished pointing at all of these bad places, IG says, so, you see, you will have to replace that roof before we can cover it. Me, you're right, I've been busy, so on the inside I hadn't paid much attention. So can you file the claim for me or do I need to go talk to one of the ladies down at the office? IG, claim? What do you mean a claim? Me, well, best I can figure it was those bad storms back in April that did all this damage and you all were covering it through my GMIL's policy, so I reckon you all would be who I'm supposed to talk to, right? I like turning the backwoods country accent up to 11 when dealing with people who think they're smarter than me. It adds flavor to the humble pie for them. IG, well now hold on. Me, nah, you're 100% right. It took some serious storm damage and we ain't had none since that bout back in April. Now, I put the fire policy on in July, so any damage done would have fell back on the old policy. IG standing there, sucking air like it's gonna run out. IG's boss, he's right. And since I have a year to file that claim, we will have to do it. Get the paperwork started and let me know if you need help. I'm no roof expert, the roof could have been shot all to hell for all I know. It looked good and didn't leak. After I explained to the adjuster what the whole deal was about, he found enough other stuff wrong so that I wasn't out 1 nickel on an entire new roof. By the way, a few points to help clear something up. My wife was executor of the estate and had a POA for the deceased. I referenced the storms in April because that year there were multiple bad hailstorms that came through. Car dealerships lost entire inventories from these storms. It was an insurance nightmare all year long, which was why nothing was really questioned. The rest of that year was fairly calm weather-wise, so it was most likely the event that destroyed the roof. The roof was about 5 years old, give or take. Wear and tear was not a concern and the insurance company had held the policy on the house since forever and were familiar with it. IG was wanting me to pay for the roof out of my pocket. If this had been pointed out in July when I had the policy changed originally, it would not have irritated me as much. After spending the entire summer and fall working on the house and him popping up with, oh yeah, by the way, yes, it rubbed me the wrong way. I'm a hick bumpkin, and some of the other names mentioned. I love that people automatically shave 30 points off of my IQ for talking the way I do. Insert jokes about my now negative IQ here, please. It gives me a distinct advantage when someone does this, and yeah, I play it up for my own amusement and benefit. It's no different than a woman using her looks, a policeman using his badge, or any of the other advantages people use daily. I don't type in my southern accent all the time because it's not easy. It's almost like making a language up as you go, and if it is that hard for me to type, I can only imagine what someone who's unfamiliar with the vernacular would go through reading it. I would imagine there would be migraines and brain scans involved before they got to the end of the post. And the next one is a malicious compliance story, which is titled "Caravan Park Wants Us to Close a Free Campsite." So I'm part of the community board in a small town. Our community relies on tourists to keep afloat. These tourists stay at a free campsite at the edge of town. Caravanners can stay legally here for a month. The campsite is also valuable for the local homeless people in beaten down cars and on foot, and we do not move them along as policy and let them stay indefinitely. For context, our campsite had showers, taps, power outlets and bins scattered around. The local caravan park took us to court, saying that as a taxpayer-funded entity, we are causing them a loss and causing an uncompetitive advantage. The local caravan park charges $80 for a small patch of grass and is quite small. Our town's economy would suffer if they had it their way. So then here's what we did. We simply removed their showers and replaced the power outlets with a large solar-powered USB charging station. The caravan park took us to court again, and they lost this time. And yeah guys, I suppose no good deed goes unrewarded, right? Props to OP for doing what they do, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.